Thank you for tuning in to the Natty News Daily podcast. This episode is brought to you in part by our sponsor, Core Nutritionals. You can check out corenutritionals.com for all your supplement needs and use code Natty News Daily at checkout to save 20%. Enjoy the episode.
There we go. What's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of Natty News Daily. We've got a pair of very special guests on, Mr. AJ Morris, Mr. Josh Kenyon, the new WNBF Pro Muscle Mayhem champion. Welcome to the podcast team. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Being on, yeah.
Yeah, this was a bit of a time schedule coordination, but we made it work. We've got a global conversation going on right now, but it's all good. It's all good. So let's hand it over to Josh. Let's back up a little bit to what brought you to working with AJ. Now, what are we, 2 years later? You guys have now been doing this thing together?
Yeah, it's funny because the show was like exactly 2 years from the time we started working together. So Everything came full circle there. But yeah, so just to backtrack, I competed for the first time in 2018. And that's actually, funnily enough, when me and AJ initially connected just through Instagram. I was working with 3DMJ at the time, and I was prepping for that show, and that's when I first started getting some exposure.
It's funny, that's actually how I found out about you. I remember AJ sharing a post or something of you, and I think I remember messaging AJ being like, dude, this kid's crazy. And you're like, yeah, he's like 19. And now here we are all these years later. But continue. Super cool.
No, yeah, that 3DMJ helped, bring me to the forefront of natural bodybuilding. And yeah, that was a surreal experience. I had just been training at my house for years. I just fell in love with bodybuilding and fell in love. Really, it was training. I fell in love with training, and so I was just an obsessed teenager for 5 years, training in my house using only free weights. Until I decided I wanted to do a cut, and my first cut ended up being a prep. So I prepped in 2018 for the Mayhem, and yeah, I did that show and won the junior class, won the middleweight class, and then battled it out with Ace in the overall. And he took the win there. But yeah, after that, my goal was to come back to the Mayhem and win. That was the goal. So I took time off, and then in 2020, I came back and prepped with 3DMJ again, with Jeff Alberts again, and went through, I call it a prep because I got very close to stage lean, actually, during that process, and that ended up being like just the hardest prep, the worst experience I had. Just a combination of things. There was the virus, but there's also just, my own mental health issues. And then also like the big issue was like an eating disorder,
Oh, wow.
Which was something I just never had addressed, that initially it came to light, when I did my first prep. But it was just something I never addressed. And, I only worked with 3DMJ, for a contest prep. So outside of that, I had always done my own thing. I had always, had my own eating habits, and, I never addressed those. And, it just really affected that prep, and, the added stress that wasn't, I didn't manage my stress well. And that is something that you have to learn to do when you're going through a contest prep. And so that really affected things. Just, having to change my environment. I had to move back home mid-prep. I was doing it like an internship, going to school, taking classes, started, binging and not telling, I wasn't being open with Jeff about that as well. I wasn't being open with him about my struggles or anybody.
Yeah.
And yeah, that affected things, and I just never ended up making it to the stage that year. And yeah, after that, I got to a place where I just, I actually fell out of love with training too. And I felt like, I just couldn't go through a contest prep, and do it the way I felt it should be done.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just, in my mind, I felt like I couldn't do it. So that was where I was at. And yeah, I got to a point where I wasn't training as consistently.
Yep.
I wasn't enjoying it. And then, one day I had to reflect on everything, and I realized, like, dude, you're gonna waste your potential if you never compete again. You're gonna regret it. You are. So I just listened to that voice that was telling me to reach out to AJ,
Yep.
because I knew even before then, like, if I would ever work with anybody else, it would be him. And so yeah, one day I was at work. During work, I sent him a message on Instagram, and I think it was Instagram, and then he shortly afterwards like gets back to me, and I just knew it was what I needed to do, and
Yep.
so we started from there. It wasn't like, at least in my mind at the time, it wasn't initially the plan to even do a show. Even though I reached out to him, it was really more so like I wanted to work with somebody.
Get some guidance.
Yeah, because I had never worked with anybody in like an off season with my training or with nutrition, and I knew his approach was different, and
Yep.
I wanted to try a different approach out. And I wanted to just learn more. And so yeah, that was the reasoning behind that.
I think what you went through is a lot more common than people think. I'm sure AJ, you as a coach as well. Like I've seen it. I mean, every season, you get one or two that you're like, this is going to be a battle post show, whether it's like, eating issues or, falling out of love with it, that passion. Like you touch on that at all, AJ?
Yeah, no, 100%. I definitely see it a lot, and it's. I think a lot of people feel embarrassed to kind of admit that that's happened to them, and
Yeah.
it makes them weak, or it doesn't make them a good bodybuilder. But the reality is, it's like, especially for first timers, it's you're getting yourself into a scenario in which it's incredibly challenging to kind of get back to being a normal person at the click of a finger. You can't just go back to being that normal dude who ate a pizza every night and just grabbed
Yeah.
whatever food he wanted. It's like you change as a person, and I think one of the big things that we've worked on with Josh, just naturally as a byproduct of working together, is just habits and routine. Just like the routine and habits that he's now got are so instilled that it's kind of much more difficult for him to veer away from that, and it makes it, even in this window of time right now where we're getting back to things sort of post contest, it's made it a little bit more of a more fluid transition. And obviously it had to travel back home and things like that. And we noticed in that window, that was the difficult window, just because he didn't have his, normal routine, his normal home comforts, and the things that get you stabilized as a bodybuilder. So that's what we've really worked on. And I think the other thing is just like stress management. So we'd never get to a point where he feels overwhelmed or, worried or concerned, and then opening up the door of communication so that if there is ever a point where he feels like he needs to tell me something or, be honest about a situation, he can be. But the whole prep has been no troubles with on that side of the thing, on that side of the equation, just because I think again, the off-season habits that we set were so solid.
Is there anything in particular you try to really drive home with clients, like as far as habits go?
I think as a bodybuilder, making as much as you can. I know it's difficult with people with different jobs and lifestyles, but literally making your days look as robotic as possible. I know that, again, doesn't work well with everybody. People need kind of different stimulus in their day, and don't get me wrong, you can do different things, but especially when you're in a contest prep setting, going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, eating your meals at the same time, drinking water at the same time. It's like you're not then second guessing what you have to do in a day. And then you're also not having any decision fatigue about what you do. When do I do cardio? Should I do cardio later or earlier? Or, should I eat a meal now? Or am I hungry now? You don't second guess anything, so that therefore, as a result, you get to the end of the day and you're like, okay, have I done X, Y, and Z in the right order? If I have, I've completed another day, move on to the next. And it's also for Josh as well, something that I actually took from being around Josh over the weekend of the show, is that he's now probably more skilled than I am. And I don't know whether he was always good at this, but more skilled than I am at just being very present, extremely present. I'm personally always someone that struggles with that, because I always think about what's next, because I've got a kind of a mindset which is instilled with me from, many years of trying to be progressive in life and business and stuff, that I just think about, okay, I've got to be better at this tomorrow, or I've got this to do tomorrow, or this, like. But Josh, like, something I know, so the whole weekend is, it just wasn't really asking what we were doing like next. It was just like, just totally zen, chilled in the moment, even to the point where, after winning the whole show, he was just like in his own little world, just enjoying it, enjoying it for a little bit and sucking it all in. And I personally would really struggle in a moment like that. I'd be like, wanting to just go and do everything. It's like, I'd struggle to calm myself down. But Josh, what do you think? Just a question to yourself, like, what do you think has helped you the most in terms of being present? Have you always been like that? Is it something to do with your past, or what's helped you be present?
Well, man, that's something I've absolutely struggled with forever. I think that was an issue from the beginning of my bodybuilding journey, I guess you could say, was not being present. And I think that's why, in the past, my preps were not as successful, or certain aspects were not as successful. And also why, I have not achieved my potential. Like, there's so many things I've done wrong. And, sometimes I look back and feel like, man, I could be way further along. There were so many things. And that was a big issue, is just not being present. Always focusing on, like, I'm never good enough. In some ways that drove me, to progress, because, like, from the beginning, it was always a focus on, like, I gotta do more. I have to get stronger. I have to put on more muscle. Like, never enjoying, like, that moment. And even, like, doing my first show, I certainly wasn't as present for that moment, and for that prep, and for the prep in 2020. And so I think, man, with this, it was because of some of those mental health issues I went through, that I had forced myself to have to address, like, mental health. And that was a big issue. It's just not being present, like mindfulness, even like with my eating habits, or with my training. That was a major change, and that was so hard to change my approach to training, because just as an example, first of all, like, with my training, I was probably hardly ever present during training sessions. It was like I was just so stimulated, I guess you could say, maybe emotionally, and everything. But, like, that's what drove my training for so long, was just my emotions. And going into sessions, like, just, I remember, like, just being finished with training sessions and, like, having no clue, like, really what happened. Like, I would have no clue, like, what was going on around me during the sessions. And so that's one thing that changed, was, like, I started becoming present with my training, just, by focusing on execution, and getting the most out of sets, things like that, like taking longer than a minute to rest between sets. Like, that was one of the hardest things, was, like, just completely changing the way I trained. And then, of course, as well as the eating, I wasn't even present the way I used to eat. I used to force feed myself. I don't think people really understand how, like, bad my eating habits used to be when, I wasn't working with anybody. I would just force feed, and just, like, I had to almost not be present just to, get the
like black out to eat.
like, and so, like, things like that, I had to address. And of course, doing things like meditation, having certain practices like that.
The one thing too that I've kind of adopted from both you guys is, like, the instrumental music when you train and stuff like that, like something that almost, like, you don't even register as playing, because I've always, not always, but, like, I've gotten into the habit of, like, these hard amped up music that almost overstimulates me, and kind of like what Josh said, you're almost not even registering what you're doing, which, like, for some sets that is handy, But
Yeah,
for most of my workout, I don't need that. And it's probably detracting from, like you said, being present, being in the moment, and just like enjoying what you're doing. So that's something that I can comment on picking up from you too, is like just that motivational music or whatever, like just the piano and the instrumental stuff. I like it's helped me a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, it does
yeah,
make a
and
difference.
that's definitely like a great example there. And yeah, like I used to have I like required a certain level of stimulation
Yeah, yeah,
just to train. Like every session I had to be like emotionally to a
wired
certain point before I even went in the gym, and during the sessions it was like I think that's part of what burnt me out.
for sure. Yeah,
And so
I can also attest to that burnout from just being like, I need the pre-workout, I need the music, I need the YouTube video, I need everything to get amped up for a workout. And I'm like, dude, it's not.
yeah.
You're burnt out by the time you get off your cardio warm up.
And so, when I got to that place where I was almost like burnout, you know, that was around the time I started working with AJ. And so I had to learn to be present during my sessions because I had nothing else that would drive me to be consistent with training at that time. When we started working together, yeah, I was not in a great place mentally. And, like there was, yeah, like I had no enjoyment doing it. I don't know if it was really depression, but I really felt no sense of enjoyment doing anything. And so I had no other choice but to learn to be present during training, during whatever I was doing. And I guess in a way that helped because I wasn't being driven just by emotions with my training or with the diet or with whatever I was doing. It was, I was just being present, and it was more so I just had to shift like my mindset. It was like I'm doing what I need to do right now, and that's what matters. Like I can be at peace because I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, um, and it doesn't matter if I feel great right now. I know after I do this workout, I'll be proud of myself.
Yeah,
So little things like that, they added up over time. And so like I think going through what I went through helped a lot during this prep. Because, you have those references there. I can look back on where I was and like think like, man, dude, I was worse off then than I was through a lot of this prep. Like this isn't even that bad.
yeah, yeah. I think like struggles like that are kind of like very present in society, right? Like that inability to be present and constantly looking at like what's next? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? Like stimulus from your phone, from your computer. Like I'm sure AJ can speak to like, well, when's the next check-in I have to do? And I have to do this. So I have this podcast scheduled then. Oh shit, there's a client. They just messaged me now. Like that kind of constant, like you don't get a moment to just be like present, right? Just be here now, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's like I said, it's something that I think, especially when you're an athlete as well as a coach, it's hard to balance, because that's why I think a lot of coaches end up going down solely the coaching route, because they end up being so overstimulated by the amount of work that we end up having to do as coaches that work with a lot of clients, that they take the decision to sort of deprioritize their own process a little bit and prioritize the process of other clients. So it's a hard one to balance. But I think the most important thing with anything like this, and obviously as Josh gets more and more busy with his coaching, this is something that I have really tried to instill within him, is just like stay on top of time management and don't rush to places. There's no reason to rush to having an X amount of number of clients. I think, and you can attest to this as well, Leroy. I'm sure it's like like almost the slower you climb, the better, because you adapt. You
Yeah,
keep adapting to a new level of work. So, like in 2014, 2015, when I started doing this, I had, like 2-3 clients,
yeah,
so, and I worked with like less than 20 clients for a long time, a couple of years. And that felt like a lot of work to me. So, you know, gradually coming up in terms of workload and stimulus is a good thing. And also knowing where your limits are as well.
Yeah.
Like with anything that you do work wise, you know, business wise, just knowing where your limits are and knowing when to say no.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's,
I think too, like understanding that like more isn't always better. You know what I mean? I'm sure AJ, you could speak to that. Like with your workload, if you're at a position where you're financially good and it keeps your routine in check, keeps your lifestyle in check, you're not on the work grind 24/7, 7 days a week. Like, you know, everybody just thinks more is better and more. Oh, I'm going to make more money. I'm going to more this, more that. But the amount of sacrifices that are going to come with that, like, I mean, for you, AJ, like you're established now. Like, are you at a capacity where you're like, okay, if I stay in this range, I'm good as far as finances, lifestyle, bodybuilding, relationship. Obviously, you have a partner now too. So all those factors dictate how much work you're going to do, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I was, you know, also in the trip that we just did. If I had more people on stage, I wouldn't have been able to have that amazing experience with Josh.
Yep.
Because let's say I had another client on stage in the UK, I'd have maybe been torn between being in 2 locations. What do I do? You know, it's very difficult.
Yep.
And if I'm being honest, I like last year for me was a year where I had so many people on stage and it was amazing and I loved it. But at the same time, I don't ever want to do that again. Because what I love about coaching is the weekend that I just had with Josh.
Yeah.
I love that. Being with him the whole time, being just with him. So, you know, he's my only guy in the show. So when he wins, I win. It just feels amazing. The whole weekend's perfect. We go out for dinner afterwards with him and his family. That for me is like, that's what coaching should be.
Yeah.
Is, you know, a strong relationship with a client. And, you know, regardless of what level they're at. You know, if I can do that multiple times, it's harder here in the UK, unfortunately, because we only have so many shows and have a lot of people that want to do the same shows. But when I can make that happen, and I've got a few more shows like that set up with clients this year that will be really, really good, because that's how I got into this was spending weekends like that with people. So yeah, that's what makes it special in my opinion.
Oh, for sure. Okay, let's jump to prep. So when did it start? What was that process? The first quarter of prep. How did that go?
Who's taking the helm?
Let me hear Coach's perspective.
Okay, sure. So I've actually got like it'll be a few things to go through because I've popped up his data in front of me, so I just get things right. So we officially started what I would call like a pre-contest diet. And we started that at, let me just scroll back to the most recent data. We started that in November, late November. We started that at 200 pounds. And if I'm honest, I would not have ran this with Josh if his appetite hadn't hit the wall that it hit.
Amount of carbs he was taking in was outrageous.
Josh can
close to 1,000, I think, right?
Yeah, it was just obscene amount of food. It wasn't even like the clean stuff. Like it was off plans most days, wasn't it, Josh? Really?
I remember the Ben and Jerry's at night. I see those in your story.
It got to that point. It got to that point where I would eat just whatever that last meal because I couldn't eat chicken and rice again to save my life. Like,
so with him, AJ, were you like, okay, here's meal plan or here's macros? Like how did you structure things with Josh?
Sure. So like the whole time we've been on a meal plan. At the end of the off season, we had to be sort of quite a little bit more freedom with what we ate, and also like some blended meals and things like that. I think looking back on it now, and the time that I got to spend around Josh over the weekend, I think I diagnosed a little bit more of what the problem was. It wasn't necessarily like we'd hit a wall with appetite. It was more so just the routine at that point in time. As much as we tried to make the routine good, what he was doing for work, the travel involved, the clients he was PTing, it just wasn't quite conducive with fitting in 5,000 plus calories. We see this a lot with bodybuilders that work with clients in person or have a job where they're on their feet a lot or they've got limited time to eat. that just getting in the quantity of food is a task within itself. Just getting in 5 meals, let alone getting in a lot of calories. So, and that was the main difficulty. So that really didn't allow us to ever budge above 200 pounds. And, you know, for people that follow me, like a lot of people will understand that I like to push clients pretty far up in off seasons, just because I feel like that's where a lot of performance lies for natural athletes. And don't get me wrong, like Josh was already, you know, pushed up, you know, stage weight is in the mid 160s. So 200 pounds is a good amount above his stage weight. But at the same time, I feel like we could have quite comfortably pushed to like 210 pretty comfortably, no problems in terms of body comp, and set up the pre-prep diet from there. But, you know, strength was incredible at that body weight. You know, he was, you know, 6-plate RDLing, you know, easily doing 315 on a seal row with minimal momentum, you know, so all of these things he was doing in the gym were, you know, definitely paying off. Muscularity wise, he was his biggest ever. It's sometimes quite hard or quite distracting with Josh as well, because he's got such deep cut developed abs that he'll have like pretty good 6-pack abs at like 200 pounds.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's easy just to look at that and think, oh, guy's like super lean. But, you know, obviously we still had a lot of weight to come off to get into stage condition. So yeah, pre-prep diet, that was in November, started at 200 pounds and we worked our way down to mid 180s. And then we had only a short stint, about 5 weeks in between the pre-prep, because the pre-prep itself was only 6 weeks in length. It was very short. So it was mostly just to get us back into basically a better spot with less stress on his digestive system going into prep. That literally was it. It wasn't really relative to body composition. I'd have been quite happy with him starting at 200, but the 200 was just getting so unfeasible to hold that we had to come down. So came down to mid 180s, pretty much maintained the mid 180s, came up a little bit in that phase of 5 weeks working up calories, where we worked them back up to quite a nice amount, like 3,500 calories, and he was gaining weight. So it was a nice amount, wasn't too much. Then we started prep at 25 weeks out. And that was, again, sort of like high to mid 180s. So yeah, that's the first phase of prep that we did. Any questions on that at all?
No, makes sense.
My question would be, so I guess this is jumping ahead maybe a little bit, and you alluded to it, but Josh obviously holds a very tight midsection, even deep into off season. I experienced a lot of that myself, not to the extent Josh does, but at what point was your upper body ready, Josh or AJ, either one, if you wanted to answer that? Because I would imagine, you said you competed mid 160s. I'd imagine your upper body was kind of ready pretty far in advance of that. I deal with the same shit. It's like 15 pounds ahead, and it's like, man, I just got to keep digging. So I mean, that's jumping ahead, but I'm curious how you manage that.
Yeah, I reckon what 180, Josh. I think like 170, 178, 180. I was pretty happy with upper body conditioning. Maybe a little bit through. See, the thing is, it's weird because you're right in saying that it's the abs, it's the upper body in general, but then there's also, like, for Josh, it's like the lower back. His lower back's actually probably more stubborn than his glutes. Like lower back took a while to come in. And that's
just
crazy,
like through the
because
erectors
the
or the
muscle
lats,
there, it doesn't really
both?
make sense. Sorry, mate?
Through the lower lats or the erectors, or both?
It's more so the erectors. It's like the
Okay.
very, very, yeah. It's almost like the very bottom of his back, close to where, you know, you get like almost like Christmas tree insertions, things like that. It's a bit of lower lat and erectors, to be honest. It's a bit of both. But that kind of came in probably last, if I'm honest, out of everything. Would you say that was you'd agree with that, Josh?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because like my first prep, you know, it was not the case. That wasn't the case. You know, my the lower right came in a lot earlier, so it was interesting how, you know, this go around, it just, you know, it took longer to get that fat off.
Why do you think that is?
I think just maybe age, maybe just added muscle. You know,
Too old, Josh.
Things were a little different than getting on up there now. But
Getting,
you know, like that
getting
first
into
prep
the master's classes.
Yeah, he's knocking on that master's title next year at this rate.
You know, it's funny because the first, you know, is like, it's kind of the way my body fat is, like, when I did my first prep, it was like completely upper body first and then lower body. So this, I feel like the older I get, the more I diet, the more my distribution becomes a little more even with whenever I diet. So
Yeah.
like the first prep, it was like my upper body was completely ready before my lower body ever lost any body fat. So,
It's
this
funny
will definitely
how
be different.
it's funny how body fat distribution can play such a role. Like my last season, like 12 weeks out, I had lines in my glutes, but my quads were so much further behind. So like all my back shots looked unreal. Then I do like front lat spread, and same as Josh, like upper body's good, but it's like quads are not deeply cut at all. So it just like, even like you said, like preps are different, right? Like you'll prep next time and all of a sudden AJ will be like, dude, your lower back's in, but your ass is still fat. Like it just, I feel like people just expect the same thing every season, and every time it's not at all.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I think there's definitely, obviously some of it is like where the muscle was distributed as well. And I think from stage shots, it's quite clear to see that there was such a heavy amount of lower body mass gained through, especially through Josh's posterior chain.
For
His
sure.
glutes and hamstrings, they look like they've just doubled in size compared to 19. So, and I also thought that his quads came up by quite a bit as well, because previously I think his quads just lacked a little bit of like oomph and fullness and roundness to them. So they got brought up quite a bit. So again, I think muscle distribution played a role in where the body fat came off.
Yeah. I do think just carrying more muscle, it just spreads the fat a little thinner, just logically.
Yeah. I also think it's relative to how long people spend in off seasons as well. I think the longer you actually spend away from true stage condition, the more it changes. That's something that I found. If people I've seen people come down like year after year and they seem to have very similar preps, but then you see people go up and they come up for like 2 or 3 years out, and then they come down and things are of course much different because it's had more time to change, plus more body fat has had more time to stay there. So I think that definitely plays a role.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? If you're just kind of rinse and repeating, maybe your body doesn't get that chance to change all that much, maybe with regards to that.
Hold, because you only come up and then you're straight back down again. So you're not really spending much time at like peak body fat. And if you do it right, you're probably not even getting that heavy anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
So
But from that 180 point, did you notice he started running real flat up top, or flat and up top other than like the lower back, or how did you guys work that? Maybe, jump that into the next part of the prep. Curious.
Yeah, I think that's where the diet breaks came into play, really, because once we sort of got to a point where I saw that we were getting, in my opinion, ahead of schedule, there was bits of detail that were coming in, especially for like the glutes and the hamstrings. They were still a way off, but I knew that if we got a little bit too ahead on those areas, maintaining training performance and also trying to like keep a hold of sleep, keep a hold of, satiety and appetite regulation would just be in the trenches. You'd be feeling so rough at like 6-7 weeks out. So I wanted to get ahead ready, but like I wanted to have that at like 2 weeks out pretty much, rather than be there at like 5 or 6 weeks out, because we're not looking to reverse someone at like 6 weeks out. It's just like that's hell on toast for a lot of people if that happens. So yeah, we wanted to aim to be ready at 2 weeks out, which I'd kind of predicted would be in the mid 160s. Dipping into the 160s was my initial estimation, but ended up being like a touch lighter. And some of that body fat actually came off when we reversed. But yeah, the diet breaks played a huge role. We didn't really do like many sort of single day refeeds or double day refeeds. We did mostly just whole weeks at maintenance, or perceived maintenance, should I say. And obviously a little bit of body weight came on through glycogen. We also combined that pretty much every time with a devolume week, or a deload week, whatever way you want to call it. So we rid both training fatigue and some diet fatigue. And normally it would also be at a point which Josh gave me some feedback and he was like, right, I'm feeling it now. This is starting to get tough.
Yeah.
Then we'd back off the gas pedal. And by the end of that, he'd feel much better.
Okay.
We're back at it.
We are back. Part 2, right after part 1. How cool. So last 6 weeks of prep. So what did that look like? You mentioned AJ doing, diet breaks to manage fatigue, manage all that kind of stuff. Upper body was pretty well on the money. So we just got to get that lower half in. What did that last stretch look like for Josh?
So in terms of the final 6 weeks, we had our last sort of proper training deload at around about 6 weeks out. At that point, we're in the low 170s. I knew we were going to be very, very close to being ready at this point. It was like the final few bits. And this is where I think sometimes this is where experience is key, because if you took me back, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I would have probably pushed a little harder at this point, looking back at the visuals. If I look back at the visuals now and I thought, okay, this is 6 weeks out, I know what I want to bring. Let's push the hammer down a little bit harder, because there was still, and Josh would attest this as well, like, and Josh would feed back to me that he could still feel body fat and that the glutes need to come in a little bit more. And I knew that as well. But from experience, not just coaching athletes, but also being an athlete, I know the difference it makes to take a bit more off, but not push any harder, not put any more fatigue through the body, and then start actually pulling us out and actually just turning the needle the other way and pulling up food very gradually. And then that actual process pulls off the final few little bits, because some of it is not actually like body fat anymore. Some of it is actually just a bit of body fluid that's almost like a bit of a film on the edge of what is a really hard granite look. And that's what I knew was underneath there, because you could see it. Like, Josh would send me morning shots, Josh would send me post-workout shots, he would send me videos, he would send me stills, he'd send me this lighting, he'd send me that lighting. So you could see, like, for example, in some poses from the back, you could see his glutes like ripple into something that just looked crazy, like looked nuts. So I knew what was under there, but then it wasn't always on. Like, there was a bit of film over the edge of the skin. So yeah, we pretty much sort of kept dieting, but didn't really change much. Like, there was a few little tiny adjustments to food, but very minor. Rate of loss was pretty steady, losing just like over a pound maximum at that stage. So no more than 1% of his body weight. Must add, there wasn't really anything to remove fatigue wise with expenditure, because we didn't do cardio this prep. I just didn't need it. He's quite, relatively active. Yeah, 10,000 steps a day was enough to get him moving. No weighted vest. Nothing really needed to be used, and food wasn't ever really that low. Like, his rest days at the very lowest just crept below 2,000. His training days never crept below 2,100, 2,200, 2,100. So his food was still okay. Again, for someone who's on stage in the mid 160s, that's not a bad amount of food to be on at the end of a prep. So then we just pulled calories up a little bit into the show. That's it. And this is probably where, again, I'll let Josh speak and attest to this a little bit as well. But this is where I actually learned a hell of a lot, because I came into this peak thinking, I actually think I told Josh at some point, I was like, I think you're going to be on like 450, 500 carb, like by the end of the height of this like peak that we'll run. We never got anywhere close. Really surprising, because Josh has a physique where really does not need much to get him where he needs to be, and too much makes him look way worse. We went there in the first week of peaking. We went a little bit too high on a couple of days, and the spill was, like, your Josh, remember, right, quite considerable, right?
Yeah, there were a few days where I was a little watery the next day from the extra carbs.
That's something that I found with Ural, my client that I had earlier this year, because he's very round and bubbly, and it was almost beneficial to keep him a bit flatter because he was lean and so round that even flat, he was round enough that, and he's short, he's like 5'4", so that short round physique but flat and just peeled almost was more beneficial than filling him out and risking that blur and him looking all of a sudden 3 weeks out.
It's like with that muscle as well, it's hard for it ever to even look that flat. If anything, when it's spilled, it actually looks almost flat because it's less in your face. It's less pop. There's less pop to it. So I actually, I remember saying one of the mornings to Josh, I was like, I'm happy we've done this, because now I absolutely know that that's not where I want to go. With some people, like for example, I think completely contrary, Adam Powell is a physique where if he's flat, he's way worse. Like the difference from him from one show to another show, he was like 6 pounds heavier at the Olympia compared to the Europeans, and he was just a much better bodybuilder.
Yeah.
You know, but Josh actually was his lightest weigh-in of the entire prep on show day.
Yeah.
Obviously there's like, you know, food volume manipulations and things like that drop your, like GI was really flushed, etc. So, you know, you can't, he was probably like a little heavier than that weigh-in really, because we just played around with a few things food wise, but like he was crisp, dry as a bone, you know, and plenty full as well, you know, like maybe he could have been a bit fuller, but I don't think that would have changed much in terms of like either the result or the look. I was super happy with what we presented.
It's a risk to reward, right? Like you're like, okay, am I gonna push this to get 1 or 2%, but also potentially risk drawing it back 30%, or am I just gonna play the safe call because it's still a fantastic look? I think most coaches would probably agree that the safer, solid bet is to just keep it how you expect it to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing with these kind of peaks as well, is that they are really predictable. You know, like perhaps through you know, depletion and refilling and super compensation, there is some scenarios in which you can gain a couple of percentages and move up in a close lineup. That might be someone that gets someone the edge, and I totally respect that. But I think in this scenario, like, you know, not sounding cocky about how Josh looked, but he was a very, very clear winner. You know, he could have been in the pro lineup that day and done very well. So, you know, to get him on stage and just get him there with a stress-free peak was the priority, especially with travel involved. The travel for Josh was pretty far as well. So, you know, we'd set it up from 2 weeks out where we had like a weigh-in the evening right before he went to bed and a weigh-in in the morning. So I knew the exact difference between the two. So I knew if he went to bed at a certain weight, he was probably going to wake up very close to a certain weight. And then I knew exactly how that weight looked. And then it's as simple as just achieving that. And luckily it was extremely predictable. So we barely had to change hardly anything. And obviously being there in person as well was the cherry on top of the cake.
So what did you do that last week then? So you said you pushed it the 2 weeks out and you were like, little too hard. So what did that last 7 days look like then?
It was pretty much just like a little bit of a reduction from where we went initially. So where we went initially was like like a 40 carb, then another 40 carb, then another 40 carb. And there was one day where we were about, I think, probably 150 to 160 carb above baseline. So not very much. Like some people, I'll get like 300 carb above their baseline. You know, it's crazy how people were so different. But yeah, not very much above baseline, but then it just, the scale weight went up a couple of pounds. The look was super blurry. So we brought it back down, had the look pretty much maintained. And then we didn't really change food at all. We just kept it literally static because we'd found something that both post workout and in the morning looked great. And that was also a time where we'd gone into the deload sessions, which again for Josh works well. You know, for some people, I don't get them to run sort of deload sessions in a peak week because they respond really well to the like inflammation that normal training gives them. So they have more pop and more roundness and more fullness out of that. But Josh visibly got harder and fuller in that final week from pulling off training fatigue. And that's also something that we learned further up in the prep, that he'd responded pretty well to that. So again, I think if there's any sort of lessons that coaches can learn is just, you know, the more data you collect throughout the entire prep, the more confidence you're going to have going into any form of peak, regardless of what approach you take, because you've always learned something from 6 weeks out, 8 weeks out, 10 weeks out, whatever.
Yep. Cool.
That's interesting. Cool. Yeah. It seems like I'd say most people seem to do well with that quote unquote deloaded, devolume training during that peak week. But yeah, it's something I've given thought about just recently, just with what for myself, what would be a better look is because I noticed I haven't played with it during any peak weeks, but like just in general at the end of my mesos when I'm pushing the hardest and volumes the highest proximity to failure, closest proximity to failure, like the look is just fuller. But like, I don't know how that would translate to stage, but I mean, for guys like Josh, and it seems like most people, they respond well to the D volume and or deload approach, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, that's really interesting how you seem to have noticed some differences between people.
Definitely.
So how did you make that call then to do that? Did you, in that first week, did you start pulling stuff to see what would happen, or like the first of the 2 weeks, like, because it was kind of a 2-week peak of sorts?
Yeah, so the first week was pretty much normal trading, no changes at all. But because we'd learned a lot through the diet breaks and the volumes,
That's true. You had the data.
He replenished quite a lot of that like freshness and roundness to his look during those weeks. I also knew obviously we'd got travel coming up. The last thing I wanted to do was try and travel for 6-7 hours and then also try and train a normal session at one day out. It just wasn't going to work out. So the full week of devoluming. So basically also what I told Josh is I said, go into sessions and use more of a kind of almost not necessarily train like how I used to, but go in without the logbook, accumulate up to a set that's relatively challenging, and then leave it there, and use your warm-up sets as sets where you're trying to drive a little bit more blood into the muscle, but they're way away from failure. So it was like kind of it was more of a deload in intensity than it was a deload in volume. We still put a good amount of work in, but the volume was way different to what he'd normally do with like 2 all-out brutal sets with maximizing readiness throughout the warm-ups, etc. It was a very kind of different training session where there was less mental and physical fatigue. I think that's the big key.
So that one set, probably like a couple reps in the tank or so. If you had to guess.
Would you say so, Josh? Left a couple in the tank?
Yeah, so yeah, like AJ said, it wasn't really like I dropped volume. Actually for some movements may have done more sets, but they were, sub-maximal and, just more like a pump workout. I just went in, rested less between each set, make sure I got a pump. Didn't go to failure for any exercise, didn't use the logbook, obviously, just went in, didn't overthink anything, and just make sure I got a pump, really. And yeah, I didn't try to beat numbers or anything like that or take a set to failure. I just, went in with the mindset of, let me make it to the show in one week. So I was just conservative in everything.
Yeah.
Cool.
And little things like quicker eccentrics and things like that. It's usually cues that I'll give to people just to minimize any muscle damage that's going to be getting in that week. And trying to, even when you were in that different gym that we trained out one day out, trying to just stick to movements that he's kind of roughly done before, nothing crazy new. So again, we're just not like just creating tons of soreness going to the show. The last thing you want to do is be super sore on show day, unless you're someone that does actually respond pretty well to having some soreness in a body part, which is kind of the contrary for someone like me, is that I actually respond pretty well from getting my arms quite sore before a show because they just look bigger. I haven't got the same arms as that man there, so I have to do some tricks to make them look a bit better. But yeah, it's just like find what works for you, and I think the more time that you get, trialing things is just gonna benefit you. And don't feel like you have to get it right in your first show either. You got plenty. Most people have got plenty of shows and seasons to get better at doing these things.
Yeah,
we're always continually iterating.
It's so much trial and error, right? And I think people just assume that the first time they're gonna nail it, or if they have a coach that the first time they're gonna nail it. And like I'm always transparent with, especially first timers. It's like, okay, we're gonna probably do a conservative approach that's like the least room for error, but it gives us information to do it better next time, right? Even like over the course of a season, right? That first show, then the second show, third show, whatever's coming next is more refinement, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So I want to kind of close this out with just some mindset stuff, because Josh, that's something that I think for you, just from what I've observed, you've grown a lot mentally. You have that, like, the stories you've posted with like your journal and that kind of stuff, I think is super cool. Can you touch on like how you've grown throughout, whether it's been working with AJ or just the last couple of years, you've you've really grown in that avenue as not only as an athlete, but as a person?
Yeah. And it's funny. I guess the cliche is like, whenever you go through something hard, you usually, will come out better, from that situation or whatever. But, for me, like the struggles of, like my prep in 2020 and then everything that happened after, helped me ultimately be my very best in 2023. I learned a lot, and yeah, I just spent that time, from the start of us working together. It was like, for me, a lot of that was, just addressing mental health issues and, just personal development. Yeah, like having better habits, those better habits outside of, the prep carried over to the prep.
Yeah.
And yeah, just, I think that was a big issue for me was, there were a lot of things outside of bodybuilding I needed to address that I never did. And those things, negatively affected my initial preps. And yeah, once I started addressing some of those issues, my bodybuilding became, also became more successful. And that carried over to the prep. So, yeah, like, and, my reasoning for doing things, I think, shifted over time. Initially I was just a kid obsessed with putting out muscle, really and truly. And that was bodybuilding because he had, mental health issues. And, now it's like, my why has shifted as well for, why I'm doing this. And, I'm enjoying the process, and it's like, yeah, it's just changed. And so those things have certainly played a role, and like with this prep, yeah, just like better habits,
Yeah.
Better habits definitely help make this prep so much more successful. And yeah, it's just taking time though. It wasn't just like the course of from November to July. For me, the process was well, you know, before then, like 2 years from the start of us working together, so really 2 years, I was able to, work on myself, and I guess it paid off.
Yeah. That's huge, right? Like I think that translates into all areas of your life, right? When you kind of, I'll just use the term like get your head on straight, but like you said, it translated into your bodybuilding. It's going to translate to like how you are as a person, translate to your business, like all that stuff just gets better when your mindset shifts, right?
Oh yeah.
Did you what did you find helpful from AJ? What did he help instill with that process?
Just the habits outside of prep, like in terms of with eating, for example, like it's funny because some people, maybe they don't do well with meal plans, or find it too restrictive. But for me, that was something that was actually very beneficial. Part of that was just having like structured meals, portion meals, things like that, being mindful of what I was eating better foods for me, foods that are more digestible, just having a good routine there, obviously with my training, mindful eating and as well as mindful training, so, the mindfulness, I was, using that in all aspects of my life. And that was something that's just helped so much. It's just being more intentional in everything I did in my life, whether that was with bodybuilding or outside of bodybuilding. Being more present in everything I did, I really made an effort to do that. And that was the biggest thing is just, being more present and intentional in everything I did.
Yeah.
From 2021 to 2023. And then, of course, yeah, I mean, AJ, I was checking in with him every week. I had that accountability, of course, in place as well, which helped me from the start. Another thing that helped me was just, yeah, having something to look forward to, was like, I would talk with AJ every week, and at the time, it was like I didn't really have anybody else that I was opening up to but him. So yeah, he helped a lot initially, and yeah, just like a coach, but also like we became just good friends. So
Yeah, for sure.
it was something I needed at the time, and he was the person that was there.
You need people in your corner, man. I think that is probably one of the most underrated things that is about this whole coaching thing is the amount of when you have that support system, how much of a difference that it can make, right? When you have someone like AJ, for me, it was Cliff, like just someone that you really trust to not only advise your bodybuilding, but I feel like, hey man, like I'm kind of going through whatever, can I just get some thoughts from you, someone you look up to that you trust? It's honestly like a game changer. It really is.
No, yeah, that was very big. Was for me having someone I felt like I could open up to.
Yeah,
Somebody who is very reserved and doesn't like to express how I feel. And so, he was one of the few people that I felt comfortable
yeah,
being able to just open up to. So it's funny how it's somebody who's across, in a whole other country that I
for
feel
sure.
comfortable enough to open up to. But, that was the case, being, a bodybuilder, it's like, sometimes you feel like you have to isolate yourself because you're not always around a lot of people who share the same passion, that you do. And for me, for the longest, I'm used to being like the weird guy who, the guy who's bringing his food to work or working out all the time, or who's big for nothing, like back when I was in high school, that's what I would get told because I didn't play sports. But it's like I got used to being that person. So for the longest, I'm used to just isolating myself and not,
Yeah,
being
keep it
around
in.
a lot of people because most people I'm around day to day are not doing what I'm doing or care about what I care about. So, it was like we had that shared passion, and I guess that also helped too. But yeah, just having somebody there to be able to open up to, and to, we talked on a week, at least every week,
Yeah,
if not more than one time a week. So it definitely, it was a game changer.
yeah, awesome.
I certainly
Sounds like
resonate with a lot of what you said, Josh.
Yep. Sounds like a good dynamic duo, that's for sure. That's awesome. Perfect. Perfect. All right, boys, let's close this out. So where can people find you if they want to follow along? Because I know Josh's career is not ever close to being done. So if people want to stay in touch with the journey, man, where can they find you?
For me, Instagram, Kenyon the Third, YouTube, Joshua Kenyon.
Got the YouTube game coming up, which is good.
Yeah, slowly. It's nothing special right now, but there are going to be more videos for sure. And you can check out my log on Natural Bodybuilding Worldwide, as well.
Cheap
And
plug.
It's a great plug.
yeah, yeah, and that's what's cool about this is like, we're from two different countries, but we connected together through this thing we both love.
Yeah.
And that's what the site's all about.
For sure. For sure. Amazing. AJ, plug them all, man.
Yeah, obviously, if you sort of don't follow along on Instagram, AJ Morris on there _ I think it's after it. And yeah, guys, obviously, like, first and foremost, appreciate all the support for everything natural bodybuilding. Appreciate the support that Natty News Daily is getting and the amount of people that are following that page and the effort that you guys put into the podcast and the Instagram posts and keeping on top of that, because it takes work, takes effort, but the sport as a whole is everyone's getting better. So, natural bodybuilding worldwide is growing as well. So yeah, it's truly just sort of getting better all around. So, yeah, obviously if you guys like this, you'll probably like natural bodybuilding worldwide as well. So everyone's supporting everyone, and yes, it's good stuff. But we really appreciate you having both of us on. Thank you for having me. Apologies if I talk too much. I'm a talker, so
Not at all, man.
Talk all day about this stuff. I didn't want to take Josh's limelight, but it's hard because I also like talking about Josh. I find myself talking about Josh way too often. Loz is telling me off like left, right, and center. So
sitting around having dinner, and he's like, "Oh, you see what Josh did today?" All right, people, if you guys enjoyed this episode, let us know. Obviously, show some support for Josh and for AJ. We appreciate it. We just love this whole natural bodybuilding thing, and the fact that the four of us in 3 different countries can get together and talk about it's pretty damn cool. So thanks you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.